Context. It's the number one concept used now. We live in an AI world. And I think it's correct. Shared context is becoming infrastructure. So let me tell you about a story inside Lufthansa. The ancillary team, the team responsible for baggage booking revenue, saw their numbers drop. And they did what any other good team does. They started investigating root cause analysis, prioritizing some space on the roadmap for potential new solutions to be shipped. They were about to spend serious time and resources fixing the problem until someone said, but hey, wait, let's have a look at the overall booking experience. Is there something else that we might have overlooked? And they did. Another team upstream in the journey had launched a promotion that included, amongst other things, a free bag. And that bag therefore wasn't disappearing, it was just being booked in some other place. So that this team didn't see it and the other team did it, the revenue went down, but there wasn't a problem because that bag still was booked. But without shared context across those teams, they would have never known. They would have optimized hard for a problem that didn't exist. And this story that we're seeing today play out over and over again isn't about data. Lufthansa and you as well have plenty of data, but this is about meaning. It's about setting the right context. Different teams operating inside different models of reality, looking at the same customer and drawing completely different conclusions is more common than you think. And now AI is exposing that the gap is becoming unmanageable, and it is actually a structural problem. So I want to get into why fragmented context is one of the most expensive problems in the enterprise today, and what it actually means to fix it. Most organizations assume customer experience scales with more visibility, more metrics, more dashboards, more feedback loops, more reporting layers, but that's not really what scales it. It is actually like agreement between different teams on how we're looking at the specific problems. Agreement on what every word means. Agreement where in the customer journey a signal actually lives. And without that, you don't have shared intelligence. You have a collection of local truths that occasionally collide for better or for worse. And this is what I see in most enterprise environments, right? They already have feedback systems. They have journey maps. They have dashboards. They have operational KPIs, call recordings, VOC tooling. They're not short on data. Like, that's not the point. But ask like 5 teams what friction means. Okay, support says customers are confused. Product says adoption is low. Operations says the cycle times is too high. Margins are shrinking, as finance says, right? There are so many different ways of looking at this. And then the customer experience teams comes in and says, yeah, we have not enough satisfied customers. Everyone's right, but they're right inside their own model of reality. And so each team optimizes for their own model. Support goes for clarity, product optimized for local usage, ops optimizes for efficiency, like are people actually completing the task at hand, finance optimizes for yield, and customer experience optimizes for the score. Typically, properly designed customer experience functions, they sit in the middle and they're trying to connect the dots. But what they realize is there is no shared dot system. So what happens is alignment meetings are used, but they don't really align teams other than some agreements in the meetings that happen. Competing dashboards that they create for the different teams measure similar but different realities. And local optimizations quietly undermine each other. Like the Lufthansa story is what looks like in practice how this plays out. The ancillary team has a KPI. The SIMB team has a different KPI. Neither was wrong, but there was no shared context to let them see how the customer is actually moving through the same journey with Lufthansa. So when the numbers are moving, they couldn't tell the difference between a real problem and a measurement artifact, right? And that's not data shortage, that's context shortage. So we're adding AI, and then the pattern you will see is customer experience teams start collecting more feedback, or they are already collecting feedback through surveys, tens of thousands of rows of responses every month, and they feed it into their AI model or use the out-of-the-box analytics from their survey provider, expecting insight to come out on the other side because they have AI now, right? But what they find is that, first and foremost, half of the data is empty fields or one-word responses, so you can discard that, or answers so generic they carry no signal at all. The AI processes it, topics emerge, and they look very plausible. But the output is only structured as the input. So it's crap in, crap out. And that's the deeper problem, right? People will assume AI will find meaning inside the messy data. because we now have access to all the data, there must be more meaning. But it won't. AI reflects the structure that's already there or the lack of it. So extend that to how teams define things, right? The ancillary team is classifying baggage friction in one way, and the product team is classifying booking drop-off in another way. And the promotions team isn't in the model at all. You don't just get silos, you're getting siloed systems running at machine speed when you are adding AI for that. But because CX teams don't have access to product data, roadmaps, or primary research in some cases, which sit with UX, the survey data is all they have. And that is maybe not even the place where friction in baggage booking is showing up. So AI doesn't resolve misalignment alone, right? It operationalizes it if we keep doing the siloed approach to understanding from our different angles what's going on with the customer experience. Which means the question of shared context, which is used to be a coordination problem, is actually like a structural risk. Because when you automate, when you apply agentic tooling, when you apply AI to the data that you're having, before you actually scale, before you deploy, the definition work has to be done. If you do not have that shared context, you just basically get more crap in and more crap out. So what does it actually mean to build that shared context? It's not a taxonomy project that some people think, oh, we just label and structure things and it's done. It's also not a better journey map. It's not another workshop. It's a structural answer to the single question: where in the customer journey does this signal live? Start with the customer journey, not touch points, not channels, not departments, but the actual movement of a customer through their experience with you. From, okay, I want to go on a trip, whether it's for business or pleasure, like I'm going to go through all the steps to get my tickets booked, get my baggage done, and then basically like prepare for the trip, go to the airport, take the trip, and then, land somewhere new and somewhere around you, with or without you, before they engage with you, during they engage with you, after they engage with you. Then you can truly understand like what you're measuring and place that inside this structure. Okay, not say like, oh, we measure this and therefore the journey is like that. No. What are customers going through it? And what do we then measure? Where are we having operational KPIs, adoption metrics, cost indicators, revenue signals? Where do they live in that journey structure? Not in the department, but where in the journey? And of course, baggage booking experience is like all these nuanced journeys underneath that, but that's not important for today. It's understanding like, okay, first we start with the structured context, and then we layer the metrics in. And now when we have that, we can layer in actual feedback. Complaints, escalations, support conversations, survey responses. It's one part of it, not the whole. Where in the journey do they occur? Not necessarily where do we measure it, but what are they talking about, right? If you're doing an NPS survey, you measure it at the end of a booking experience perhaps, but maybe there is a friction that customers speak to, or like there's something that went really well or above expectations that sits upstream in the journey. So where in that journey do these signals occur? And finally, what is the business outcome that it connects to? Okay, not the whole journey, but specifically on the phases, on the steps, however you structure it. Like, where does this connect to the business outcomes we say we find important? Okay, we want to have retention. Okay, how does better onboarding help you do that? We want to have a lower cost to serve. So where do we do handling invoice in a right way? Do we want to increase our margin? Do we want to have better conversion on our acquisition? When you start to understand that, something is changing, right? You stop having a collection of local metrics or dashboards. You start having a shared context of where reality lives and how that shows up in your data. The Lufthansa systems teams or the ancillary teams didn't need to have more data. They needed to see that their separate KPIs were measuring different parts of the same customer experience. And once they had that, once there was shared experience context everyone could look at, the false alarm became clear. Because the next time a team launched a promotion that changes the experience upstream, everyone else downstream sees it. It's not a surprise, it's visible, it's shared context. It becomes part of how we think about helping the customer and helping the business. The ancillary team doesn't have to panic anymore, they just look upstream first. And that goes for all the other teams when shared context is actually enabling them to see it through the same lens. So when context is actually shared, a few things change that are hard to get any other way. First, Teams stop debating definitions because friction, churn risk, conversion drops. Like they're all anchored to specific places in the experience context with measurable impact. So the arguments go away. Okay. For AI, it's like easier to classify specific parts, feedback analysis. The agents can categorize signals inside the same structural model and also reason over that. Instead of each one inventing its own logic based on this specific teams and its operating rhythm. Prioritization becomes more journey-based, not whoever shouted the loudest this week, not whoever had their metric drop, where it's like, okay, we need to create space on the roadmap for you, but where in that experience do we structurally underperform and what is it worth to all of us? That's a different conversation. So the strategy becomes a connection to the lived experience. Instead of we need to improve baggage booking, you can say between baggage booking and the day of flight, we see a decrease of 5% of revenue related to the baggage booking experience. What are we going to do about it? And then there's a couple of teams, including the ancillary team, that need to show up and say, hey, let's look at our different realities. And that's a different kind of clarity. That's something you can act on because all of a sudden you have shared context. So usually like customer experience doesn't fail because people don't care. It fails because smart, well-intentioned teams are operating in different models of realities. If we call it silos, that's fine, but they are not connected. Looking at the same customer experience, drawing different conclusions, sometimes working against each other without knowing that they are. Dashboards don't fix it. More AI in those teams don't fix it. What actually fixes it is enabling shared context across that team, using the customer as the anchor. The ancillary team at Lufthansa almost launched that initiative, Roadmap Resource Solutions, for a problem that didn't exist. And what saved them wasn't more data, wasn't better data. It was someone asking, like, what does the full journey look like? That's a context question. So if you want CX that scales, if you want AI that compounds instead of fragments more, then agreeing on the reality you're operating in is actually the way to go for. So it's not just the metrics, but it's the context around them. That's the foundation. And that's why I believe context is infrastructure and everything else is built on top of it.